The question in front of us was, do we build those startups ourselves, or do we create an infrastructure that enables many more startups to come? And the idea is to make the imagination flourish so that many more platforms can think about it. For the same consumer, they're able to stitch together a metro ride, a Namma Yatri ride, and a Namma Yatri or any other ride at the first mile or the last mile, and give a truly multimodal experience.
Because the supply in that sense is decentralized, Namma Yatri today can stitch together that whole multimodal experience. But they need not be the only one.
There's a very, very clear transformation that is happening within the energy sector. Today, energy is a bit more hyper-local generation, especially in solar belts like India. India has a huge solar advantage in some sense.
Like open rails can also lead to monopolies.
The consumers are becoming prosumers. They're giving energy back to the grid, and the policies are enabling that. We are seeing how some of these startups like Solar Square are thinking beyond what they already do today.
What is it about India's water that breeds this open protocol thinking?
Yeah, I keep asking myself that.
Welcome to another episode of Lunchbreak with Lightspeed. I'm your host Romit, and today I have with me Sujith Nair. Sujith is the CEO and co-founder of FIDE, which stands for Foundation for Interoperability in Digital Economy. I'm told in Latin it stands for trust. He co-created Beckn with Mr. Nandan Nilekani and Dr. Pramod Verma, and this was done to push open rails thinking beyond payments. Beckn, of course, today powers ONDC and some of our favorite apps, especially in Bangalore, like Namma Yatri. Today we'll chat about all things India energy stack and what does the future of energy in India really look like. Fair warning to you, a lot of stuff that Sujith will talk about will seem like absolutely science fiction. But that is the ambition that Sujith and Beckn have. I could not be more excited to have him over. Welcome, Sujith.
Thank you. Very generous introduction. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Sujith, before we get into all things energy, let's talk about Beckn, right? We of course know that it powers ONDC, which is the rails of open commerce, right? Tell us maybe what Beckn really is and why is it a protocol?
Great. So I might have to probably step back a little bit and talk about internet a little bit.
Yeah.
So, ever since internet has been there, people have been building platforms, generating value, exchanging value at scale. It's unprecedented how we have unlocked so much of value in the digital economy as we come to see it and live in it in some sense. It all required some infrastructure like internet for people to build platforms on. I think, and that's how essentially the UPI imagination happened. UPI is also a protocol that unlocked big apps like PhonePe and Google Pay. We think that we can extend that thought to create several more such value unlocks, value creation, and have several more platforms and startups coming up. If you want more platforms and more startups, the question in front of us was, do we build those startups ourselves? Is it one organization is going to build so many startups, or do we create an infrastructure that enables many more startups to come, like Namma Yatri, for example. So if that were to happen, you need to create a base playground on which the startups can be built. Internet, to a large extent, did what it can, but if you have to really unlock value at a much bigger scale that the whole of country, the whole of world can access and unlock, we think that you need to build more things like internet. And internet is essentially nothing but a bunch of protocols, open standards that actually keep the internet as what it is. We thought a similar effort is required. And Beckn essentially therefore comes in as a way to figure out how do we move value, just like how UPI moved money. How do we move goods and services in a way that's a bit more open loop, that is not just one platform trying to do this for the whole of the country, and we have many good successful ones, but we are not literally cutting the scale in terms of access to 1 billion people. So we said, why don't we create Beckn as a protocol that can move value as goods and services, like Namma Yatri, ONDC, now a lot of work in energy and agriculture. So that's why Beckn has come into being. It's essentially, think of it as an open language, a virtual language that the machines can do to talk to each other. Think of it like English. Your English dictionary and my English dictionary are essentially the same, which is why English kind of makes it open and interoperable. Otherwise, you'd have different meaning for words that I use.
Correct.
Similarly, if you can create a common language for any platform to talk to each other, many platforms to talk to each other, that common language that represents movement of value, especially goods and services like booking a ride, buying groceries, or booking a a hotel room or buying energy tomorrow or renting an EV car, all of that, if there was a common language so that none of these platforms are operating in silos but can talk to each other and expand the market collectively, that's what Beckn does, a virtual document, a language that platforms can implement to do it. So that's why, and that essentially in the computer world is called the protocol. So that's what it is. It's a completely free open source language of some sense. There's a whole global community contributing to that. It's not owned by anybody, although we were the authors and the creators of it. Today it's a large, wide open source community driving that. And the idea is to make the imagination flourish so that many more platforms can think about it. When we were starting with Beckn, we were thinking only about urban mobility. So saying, how do we create Namma Yatri-like platforms, make them connect with the local metros and the other transit systems and make it easy for a rider in a city to go from point A to point B so that they don't have to download 50 different apps to figure out where the next available ride is. That's where it started. And we didn't probably think beyond that. But the fact that it is a protocol, it sort of automatically made itself available and useful for commerce, for logistics, for agriculture, for energy. And that's why you need protocols. The protocols creates those unforeseeable value unlocks and creates that playground better than platforms. So that's why Beckn has chosen to be a platform and let ideas like open networks come in and have more platforms flourish and also get created.
Yeah, no, I really like the framing that it's a shared language that everybody understands.
Right.
Let's maybe make it more real, right?
Sure.
Let's talk about Namma Yatri.
Yeah.
What do you think being on the Beckn protocol allows Namma Yatri to do that it would not have been possible to do if it was on a closed loop platform?
Oh, fantastic. Great question. So if you look at Namma Yatri of course does a fantastic job of giving more agency to the drivers and giving them a fair share of the ride for themselves to be kept and unlock more rides. And that's essentially what Namma Yatri does. Essentially, it's a peer-to-peer, decentralized ride-hailing where consumers can directly talk to drivers. Of course, payment happens through UPI or cash. Makes it very simple. Namma Yatri as a platform has its own business model of just selecting a small fee from the driver. Now, what this could have been done, like the classic, the ride-hailing platforms like Uber and Ola
and they exist.
And they exist.
Yeah.
And they do a fairly good job. But with this, you're able to have a few things where you are not worried about both driver and customer acquisition every time to operate the business. Today with Namma Yatri, if you can take one side of the problem onto yourself, which is like maybe offer the best driving experience and the driver experience for the driver to get onboarded and find a ride, you solve that problem. The rest of the problem, somebody else can solve it on your behalf. Where, for example, you have different apps offering you rides because different apps have customers, like UPI apps. They all have paying customers. So they said, okay, I can probably use those apps to discover a ride. So what Beckn protocol does for Namma Yatri is to amplify its ability to reach more customers without they having to be on the same platform as the driver is.
Yeah.
So they can solve one side of the problem and distribute the cost and risk of the other side to a wider ecosystem of platforms which have an incentive to tap into this driver ecosystem. Taking it beyond that is today the fact that today if the consumers, while Namma Yatri does a phenomenal sort of driver ecosystem onto its side, it also does have its own consumer app.
That's correct.
That's some of the app that we use.
Yeah.
They do have customers. So now for them, they have an independent play because of Beckn protocol, where that app is not just offering auto rickshaw rides or taxi rides, which they themselves onboarded on Namma Yatri, but with them connected to Beckn protocol and to a wider network like ONDC, for the same consumer, they're able to stitch together a metro ride, a Namma Yatri ride, and a Namma Yatri or any other ride at the first mile or the last mile and give a truly multimodal experience. Now imagine if Namma Yatri had to do it all by themselves. Just like how they have been sort of onboarding drivers, they now have to onboard every metro and make them come onto their platform, into their database to make this work. And that's something which the metros and other transit operators are generally uncomfortable with. They want to maintain their own autonomy, agency, and saying, don't make me a driver partner. Treat me for what I am and give me a way to offer my services to people. Okay, you have a great tech job, so I can probably ride on that, but don't ask me to be on your platform as a driver partner myself. So now you have each of these mobility service providers, you have a metro, you have auto rickshaws, and you have a bus operator, you have private bus operators, all of them setting up their own way to offer their services without having to be on Namma Yatri platform. But Namma Yatri on the consumer side can still access their services and stitch together a great experience for the consumer.
Yeah.
So everybody wins in this arrangement because metros maintain their autonomy, the bus operators maintain their autonomy, drivers maintain their autonomy, but consumers still gets a combined curated experience, and that's what protocols do. That's what Beckn protocol does. It offers multi-platform sort of an integrated experience without having for one platform to step on the toes of the other.
Absolutely.
And that's what protocols does, and that's why Namma Yatri has embraced Beckn protocol and is an active player on the ONDC network for these reasons.
No, that's a great point that you've made. And actually the interesting thing for me is also that because the supply in that sense is decentralized, Namma Yatri today can stitch together that whole multimodal experience. But they need not be the only one. Like any demand app could perhaps pick that up and do that, which closed loop platforms will not allow you to do.
Absolutely. I think today's customer online is looking for convenience and choice. So, and the point of entry could be a different app. For them, it could be a Google Map or a UPI app. But the fact is, the question we are asking is, how do you make the provider services reach where the consumer already is? If their place of mainstay is a Google Map, can we make those services available there? So that is the idea. So that makes it
great jumping point to talking about how this protocol approach touches other sectors.
Yes.
So I want to talk about, of course, India Energy Stack, which is the key thing that we wanted to discuss. So maybe, for all the listeners and for us, lay out what are the challenges that you see that India Energy as a sector faces, and why does a digital layer help potentially solve some of those challenges?
Sure. No, but firstly, Romit, I think energy is super exciting a conversation. I mean, I get goosebumps every day thinking about the possibilities there. It's phenomenal. There's so many conversations that I'm having which kind of looks like we're looking at a different future in some sense. But if I were to talk about energy, firstly, energy is very foundational civilizational need, right? Think of it in a more abstract sense. It's so core and foundational. Almost every industry needs energy. And I think what we have been seeing is there's a very, very clear transformation that is happening within the energy sector. It's a very pivotal moment. Probably hasn't happened in the last century and 2 decades, ever since Edison's and Tesla's were disputing on whether it should be AC or DC current that will drive electricity. And there are many forces, right? One, today, most of the energy needs are getting electrified. So it's more electricity, form of energy. People want it to be cleaner, faster, reliable, formal way to energy. So, access to energy is becoming a way in which electricity as a formal form and way of access is becoming a very, very central topic thanks to the pursuit for clean, green energy. The second part is this phenomenal cost economics of the falling cost of battery and solar. That is adding some very unique dimensions to how we generate, supply, store energy. Today, energy is a bit more hyper-local generation, especially in solar belts like India. India has a huge solar advantage in some sense, where you are looking at pretty much everybody from the rooftop generating an electricity, right, through the solar rooftop, and the big push from the government to solarize the houses, rooftops, etc. So I think energy is becoming a bit more hyper-local in its generation. Consumption, of course, you don't need these big, spinning turbines, thousands of kilometers to cater to the increasing demand of energy. And things are getting electrified. Your vehicles are going to be electrified. Your industries are getting electrified. Data centers need energy and they need clean access to energy. So for that kind of a demand, you're not adding more generation capacity thousands of miles, which is probably using thermal, coal and others, but you have suddenly this possibility of numerous micro energy generation happening pretty much in your neighborhood. So there's a micro at a mega scale. that's happening, and there is more hyper-local, and it's becoming bi-directional in some sense. Today you can, with your excess solar energy, you don't know how much energy you generate in a particular day with solar. There's of course this intermittence and variability there, but sometimes you generate a lot of excess, and then what do you do with that? You're pushing it back to the grid. So you actually, energy, the consumers are becoming prosumers. They're giving energy back to the grid, and the policies are enabling that in many ways. All of that is creating what I call as the impact aperture. There is a moment in time where energy is becoming transformational. Now, where does digital fit into that? Because things are getting hyper-localized, decentralized to some extent, it is also adding stress to the grid. It's also adding questions about what is the cheaper access to reliable, secure energy. And there's this tension between reliability of the grid, which is actually a critical infrastructure for a country. Grid reliability is probably more important than grid economics. And there's a physical constraints to how you move electrons. So now the digitization can play a part. How does it play a part in terms of, all these digitizations that are happening across the grid value chain, whether it's a distribution company, the transmission company, or what we call the behind the meter smart appliances and EV chargers, they're all getting digitized, but they are in complete silos. Okay? There is a big coordination cost for that information to go across so that I can plan my reliability of the grid better, I can organize supply demand better. So there is a way to break these silos and connect them and make them talk to each other. So, I keep saying this, grid is electrically unified, digitally broken. Because the bits are not moving as freely as electrons do. So how do you make them integrate and talk to each other? And that is where a digital infrastructure on top of a electricity physical infrastructure makes the grid that much more resilient, powerful, and prepared for this kind of future that we are looking at, which is very, very different from the last 100 years in some sense. And it also adds new vectors like storage and battery, which is very much required to sort of deal with the variability of the renewable power. Battery becomes as a huge buffer. Now batteries too, it's a technology that we're dependent on technology from an outside country. How do we utilize the battery and the battery capacities of millions of batteries out there already and bring them into the grid? I think that's a digital infrastructure problem that we can fix through. So there is a digital infrastructure response to what seems to be kind of a flux that is happening in the energy industry. And we think the infrastructure approach, like a UPI or a ONDC approach to energy, could be very relevant.
Yeah. I was reading the paper around this, and I believe you call this concept a digital energy grid.
That's right.
And there were 3 pillars to it. There's identity, readability, and verifiability. I'm from Rajasthan. I want to explain to my grandmom why are these 3 the Lego blocks for building the digital layer for energy. Give us the simplified pitch for it.
Sure. Yeah, sure. I can give you 2 examples very quickly as to why this is important. One, so today you go to any petrol station to fill petrol in a regular car. You can go to any ATM to withdraw cash. Why is that not the case with EV charging? You probably are downloading an app for every EV charging out there. And imagine if you have to go from, say, Rajasthan, Jaipur to Delhi, you're probably downloading a lot of apps. Absolutely. And probably the reason also why you're not buying the EV car in the first place, because you have this range anxiety and then this anxiety of which charger, which app. So that's one problem. How do you fix that? Why can't we go to any EV charging and buying app? And also not from the app that you already have, like a WhatsApp or a UPI app or a Google Map and all that. So that's one. The second part is everybody is buying EV or everybody wants to buy an EV at some point. They all come home at the same time and start charging in. And this is the peak time and the grid is already at stress with all the demand hitting them. They're literally melting the grid. So by buying an EV car and coming home and charging at the same time, you're actually putting stress on the grid. And the stress will only increase as we go forward. Now, what if there is a way for me to locate a charger, identify a charger on my way? My app is able to locate any charger out there, irrespective of which app they are on, and say, can I buy energy from you? Are you available to offer energy, and can I buy energy from you? So on my way, I know that you're going to be there and I can plug it in. I can even pay from my app. I don't have to pay separately through another app. So that's one.
So this could be like, for example, WhatsApp itself.
That's right. It could be WhatsApp, it could be Google Map, it could be any of those UPI apps that we use, or even hopefully tomorrow the likes of DigiLocker or anything that the app that you're comfortable with. Now, in the other case, what if the grid, as a way to locate where the EV charger at your home is, and say, hey buddy, can you now charge later? Maybe at 1 in the night when the stress is low. How do I identify, locate? And how does the charger know it's coming from the grid and not from random? How do I verify it's coming from the local utility, the local discom, asking me to do that? How do I verify? And how do the instruction is actually valid? And the instruction means this and not something else. This, no matter which example you take, you need some common things to work for systems to talk to each other. Now, you would realize in internet, every device when you connect it to internet has an IP address.
Correct.
What if this is doable for all the energy resources getting connected to the grid? What if you can create a digital address? Once I have an address, I have a way to locate and talk. I can permission somebody to reach out to me giving my address. I don't have to give my home address. I can give an address of my device. So this addressability, identifiability and verifiability of what are they telling me, what data is being asked of me to share with my consent, or what am I claiming, saying that, oh, I have actually switched on my EV charger late in the night. How do I even verify that? If I can do that without too much of a human in the loop or too much of a cognitive load, if the systems can do that, they need common set of building blocks. Everybody can do this, but everybody does it in silos in their own way. You're again creating this cholesterol of information that is not talking to each other. This information. If you can create a common information layer with this as the general purpose building blocks for any possible need of mine, from when to charge, how to charge, or when can I sell solar back to the grid from my rooftop solar that I've just bought with the subsidy. How do I know which subsidy is available apart from the center? Is there any state subsidy? All of these are different examples where you need the same set of things commonly available. And that's what we mean by Lego building block. You can construct a EV charging at home solution from it. You can do EV interoperability, finding any EV to charge while I'm on the highway, or when to push energy back into the grid from my solar rooftop, all with the same set of Legos.
Nice.
You can build each of these solutions. So solution builders, the smart solar companies, the smart EV charging companies, the utilities which want to be a smart utility now can use these building blocks to achieve their objective. And that's what it does. And that's what Digital Energy Grid is talking about with these building blocks.
This is fascinating. I'll of course take this back to my grandmom, and
it does put power in the hands of people. Put power in the hands of the society and community and build them more energy resilient.
So let's say in a world where these devices and systems have verifiable digital passports.
Yes.
Give us more examples of what it enables that would not be possible in a pre-DEG world.
Yeah, so today I think we are very passive in terms of how we consume energy. I mean, we just say, okay, we have a meter, there's an electricity supply, and we go on using what we have to.
Yeah.
We probably don't think about energy. Probably we shouldn't. We go on living our lives. But today, there is an outage, there is an energy supply that is wavering, or there's stress on the grid. Not so much in India, but other parts of the world, yes. And you have these cheaper sources to power, and government wants to encourage you to use green power through solar rooftops and all, which makes the overall cost of energy for the country lesser. So all of these being available, and you want to drive cleaner cars, if you want to do all of that, everything generates data. They all have data as the exhaust in some sense. Can the data empower you? If you're doing a digital EV charging transaction, can that be a data that is lying with you more than the platform? Can that data be useful to you as much as useful to the platform? If you're buying solar rooftop and you are offering energy back to the grid, can you keep that? Can you have a digital copy of all the assets that you're using? You're using a battery, a solar rooftop, an EV car. Can you do that? Now, can that data offer you economic power? As an individual, as a farmer with an irrigation pump, or a flour mill operator in India, or an EV user in a city, can they use this data to unlock value? I think we can. This data, for example, maybe one of the examples is, if you have a digital copy of all these assets, okay, maybe you can get a better insurance. Especially when you have a climate event and you lost your assets, your recovery, maybe there's a proof of ownership, of access, of usage. Maybe it will look at your cost of insurance. Maybe you want to go for a second extra battery, or maybe you want to put a second solar, not just for self-use, but offer more green, clean power to the grid. How does the bank know that you're actually pushing energy back into the grid? So that it can give you a cheaper loan because it's an economic value for you. Maybe for a woman, it's an additional passive income. at home, for a homemaker at home, in the village or here, if bank wants to verify that, you have that data that is machine readable, tamper evident, trusted, digitally signed, that you can tell the bank, oh, now give me a better offer for the next solar that I'm buying or the next battery I'm buying. It will unlock value, right? And tomorrow, in some of the states, states are allowing, state regulatory commissions of energy electricity are allowing for peer-to-peer trading, which means if I have excess solar, I can offer some of that energy to you as my neighbor or other part in the same city, apart from me buying it from the utility. Maybe I can get a little bit more money than what I get by giving it back to them. So it kind of creates an economic opportunity to be a producer of energy, not just for self, for others. If you have to do that, I have to prove myself with the data that I have a solar, I have excess energy, and I can offer this to you, and I can establish that commitment using a data micro contract, like with protocols like Beckn. So all of that unlocks value for me. The more I use, the more data I'm generating, and the data I can use it for my other needs, for my own economic and social empowerment. I think that's the value. And I think it. So therefore, a wallet concept of energy transaction assets and credentials are powerful when you think about it.
We ourselves are investors in a company called Solar Square. India is, of course, the fastest growing consumer solar market anywhere in the world today. The company is doing pretty well on the back of that market and their execution. You touched upon it, but given that solar adoption by households in India looks inevitable today, what does it unlock for those users?
Yes. Now, if you look at the ecosystem, and you pretty much have people and the businesses, the consumers or the prosumers, and the utility companies at the center. Okay, and they are very, very critical, important stakeholders, and they keep the energy resilience, reliability, all that things in place as a utility. Okay. What utility can do well is to maintain the physical, electrical engineering side of the grid very, very well. And some of the utilities are doing a phenomenal work on the digital side. You still have some things is little out of bounds for them, like with behind the meter. All the things that are happening is like literally behind the meter. The people buying batteries, the people buying solar, having their own energy production and storage capacities. What I see is bidirectionality of value. Utilities offering better, cheaper, cleaner power, which they will do, and they do it best. There's also an opportunity for some of these DERs, as they call it, distributed energy resources, like batteries and batteries inside your car to solar and everything, and also your smart loads, which can programmable, all that, to be offering services back to the utility. For example, for frequency control, voltage stability, and all of that, what is called the ancillary services. You can offer services back. And I think in that whole equation, battery plays a phenomenal role, especially because of solarization. Everybody in the industry talks about this duck curve, because everybody is suddenly getting onto solar and they're not taking that demand onto the grid. They're using solar to use it, but suddenly the demand goes up in the night and putting stress on the grid. Batteries act as a great go-between buffer. Now, the question in front of utilities is, how much battery should I keep buying to play this grid balancing and offer value?
Correct.
What if some of that can be fractionally owned from the idle capacities out there? Okay, if the economics make sense, how can I offer, just like I'm offering extra solar power back to the utility, can I offer battery services to this, to the grid? So there is a mutual handshake of value. And to bring those consumers and utilities to do so much more of mutual exchange of values, you probably need, just like how banks needed fintech like UPI apps to do more payments for banking, you probably need more of these energy tech companies, which is where there's a great slot that is opening up for them to come in and create this bidirectionality of value. Both are important sort of clients or customers for them. And that's where startups and Solar Square, for example, as much as it's solarizing India in a big way by offering solar rooftop, they're allowing them to participate in harmony with the discoms and the operators. So that is something they can do. I can talk about some of the early experiments we're doing about peer-to-peer trading in coordination with the local utility in one of the states in India. I'm sure some of that will be officially stated, but we are seeing how some of these startups like Solar Square and likes of Trilectric and Pulse Energy and of course Kazam and others are participating, thinking beyond what they already do today, to think of these new possibilities and offering more value to the consumer and the utility. And utility, because as a licensed operator, they also have to solve for a reliability side of it, not just the economics. They can, in their own way, sort of take a calibrated correlation of all of this, retaining the critical infrastructure of energy supply maintained, but also unlock new value on top. So this is not clearly a UPI moment of banking. It is UPI while maintaining the resilience and the reliability of the grid. That's a very critical part. So utilities take that responsibility more than some of these startups, but combination could do so much more. And that's the part I see as a very interesting formation that's happening when you have a common digital infrastructure like the digital energy grid. And as part of the larger India energy stack, I think some of these formations we will be able to explore and pursue a few pilots and see how it can scale up to for the rest of the country.
Yeah, and I look forward to it. I mean, this is perhaps India would be at the frontier of some of these experiments. And
potentially, yes, it can, because it covers a unique opportunity. There's always, I see that this leapfrog moment for India happening multiple times. Like, we leapfrog to mobile phones with our computers, UPI, and similar one in energy is shaping up.
There is a flip side to it, though. I think the open rails also invite network effects, but can also lead to monopolies. One of the common criticisms of UPI has been that it's led to dominance by two players. Even in internet, for example, there's a DNS capture by the likes of ICANN and VeriSign. How do we prevent that in something as critical as energy?
Romit, I think about this very differently. I think there is 100,000 million-fold value to be created if you have left the playground to be kept open. Okay, I can actually have many more startups do a lot more stuff, then wait for one startup to punch above its head and to be the only species, like a species of one, to be the only person who can do this off. I think for a country as big as ours, for how the globe, humanity is looking at embracing energy and energy resilience and clean energy, I think we need to be a bit more open loop than closed loop, is my sense. So there's a value multiple, market expansion, value unlock that is good for everybody. Now, on terms of the monopoly side of the question, I think I'll ask the question differently. Even if there was no UPI, there would have been a monopoly. There would have been a monopoly where you have only one or probably two apps saying, I will do whole of India using my wallet or
Prepaid
my
wallet,
things, and I will raise money and do this. And at the end, you have a monopoly in a small market and being stuck with 100, 200 million transactions a day. Today in India, we do 18, 19 billion transactions a day on UPI, just to take UPI as an example. But you have many players. You have all the 200 banks doing transactions. We don't talk about, in those numbers, we don't talk about how much unlock it has created on the merchant side of transactions. How many banks, what is the cost of cash that has come down for banks, and how many banks are actually pitching it up? I think there's a little bit of a narrative of monopoly saying that only two companies, which is not true, because there are several banks, and it takes two hands to clap in UPI. It's not a closed loop where a PhonePe is talking only to PhonePe or Google Pay talking to PhonePe. It is, and nobody has that infrastructure sort of a kill switch by one. So there are connotations of monopoly which we need to be concerned about. Of course, we need free competition. We need more players. We should definitely address market concentration. But fundamentally, the infrastructure is designed to allow that. And then it's about how competitive you can be and play in that game without controlling the infrastructure or the market growth itself. And that's the unlock we are looking at. So I do see this concern quite shaping up, but sometimes I think it's probably mispositioning of the notions of monopoly we are talking about. But yes, would I like another 15 powerful UPI apps? Yes, why not? And we should figuring out a way to do that. And why not even banks stepping up to do that play a lot more, especially with the credit and merchant side transactions going the way it's going. There's possibility. And similar is the conversation in ONDC or in the matter of energy. And it allows you to maintain that possibility.
Yeah.
It's not a point that you're losing forever. That position can be pulled in by creating that open infrastructure.
Yeah.
So the question we're asking is, what if you don't do this? You'll still end up with a monopoly that you can't recover from.
Yeah. No, I think point well taken. And of course, while things can be even better in a perfect world, I think an open loop system has turned out to be a value multiplier.
That's right.
And in that sense, I think that's an absolutely fair point. Well, I mean, the other side that I hear from founders, and I think you're a good person to ask this. They say, hey, but if everything is open loop, where is the venture scale moat? Large outcomes traditionally have been created by founders, obviously a few of them, where the marketplaces were closed loop, right? Like you have your biggest ride-hailing apps, you have your biggest commerce apps, etc., all operating on closed loop marketplace systems. If everything is open loop, what's the venture scale moat? I, as a founder, why should I build in this category?
So I think the conversation with infrastructure splits the moat into two vectors, according to me. What is your cost of building the market for you to have a moat on? Okay, and moat as a way of differentiation, than being the sole player. Okay, it kind of splits it wide open. Imagine if you are expecting one big startup to do 19 billion transactions per month in India. Maybe somebody could have done it, but we don't see that happening at all. Maybe we wanted a ride-hailing app to be doing 100 million transactions a day, which is probably the addressable market for public rides in India, including all the metro buses put together, but nobody is doing that. We are still dealing with 7% e-commerce penetration, under 5 million annual rides per day in organized ride-hailing, while one Delhi metro does 5 million trips in a day. So we think that there is an opportunity to expand the market so that you're actually thinking about being a startup and having a moat in the first place. Now, the question is, once you get onto that playground, it's a playground for everybody, not just for you. So now you're fighting on differentiated value propositions, composable new value propositions. For example, can I offer a very, very sachetized loan for 20% of the battery being put up for available for trading with a discount to use whenever I want? Can I create that product? It's a composition of energy and financial transaction coming together. So there are these new value formulations that allows you to innovate even more and continue to. Now, if I can be an energy tech startup, I can also do energy, I can also do fintech, I can also do commerce, I can do a whole bunch of things. There is, for example, India's Suryagar, it's a 30,000 crore opportunity for unlock subsidy.
Correct.
It requires innovation with the utilities, with the subsidy, with the ministry and everything. Why aren't they startups taking that as a play? I think there's so much to unlock. And if you unlock and if you continue to do that very well, I think probably that's how you build a more sustainable moat in this country. Or you are looking at building a moat in a very, very small space and being happy about it. I mean, that's a choice sometimes. The point is, do you have the choice to make in the first place? Is what I think I would encourage the startups to think about.
Yeah, and actually, and to be fair, there are founders who have grasped that and are building that.
Yeah.
But that's a fair. I think some of that debate will keep happening, but your point is well taken. Maybe I want to end with something on a little bit more lighthearted. UPI, ONDC, India Energy Stack. What is it about India's water that breeds this open protocol thinking?
Yeah, I keep asking myself that. Maybe I think there's something in the waters for sure. But I think it's fascinating to see how India has a very multifaceted innovation play. There is massive unicorn creation and startup innovation that's happening. I think we are among the best. At the same time, there's a lot of public-spirited infrastructure-led public innovation and private innovation happening. I think it's fascinating how that happened. We believe that the next paradigm of internet scale value creation, if you want to do that, everybody wants to solve a problem and be a venturable idea, be a venture that can be investable, right? Our ask was, if I'm the only person, am I supposed to make 100 ventures to make this big phenomena happen? Or what is the way that 100 ventures can happen if you can create the fertile soil or the playground for that? And that is where protocol thinking seems to be now becoming almost like a default thinking, at least with our DPI efforts in India.
Correct.
And I think this is probably going to continue. The trend, I think UPI probably inspires us a lot more than probably it should. And then we are taking the punts one after the other, and hopefully some of them will stick, some of them will probably not. But the idea is to keep trying.
Yeah, it's a goal worth shooting for.
Absolutely.
And I know, Sujith, like from your LinkedIn, you have taken this idea across the world. I've seen photos of you at Cambridge, Stanford, whatnot, pitching about this. Maybe give us a fun anecdote about the reactions you get when you pitch this.
No, I think we're getting very exciting interest in conversations. Some of them, I think, of course, outside of India, idea of an infrastructure-based thinking to unlock value is kind of a little counterintuitive at times, but there's a general recognition for sense of urgency and the way to do it faster, better, and scalable, and articulate value propositions that otherwise are not possible without an infrastructure thinking. So very, very interesting conversations across. For example, few conversations we had with a bunch of utilities in Latin America, for example. They're saying, for example, Brazil has seen massive solarization of rooftop and the grids are saying, I have no visibility. So maybe there's an opportunity to have an infrastructure, which is not something that each utility will invest on their own, but if there's a common infrastructure, maybe I can manage them better. So that's a conversation we are having. Conversations in US, for example, as to how do we reduce interconnection delays for data centers to plug into and access 500 megawatt or 1 gigawatt of energy, or big EV trucks finding a way to get charging done, and the charging operators have an interconnection delay of as high as 3 to 5 years. How do we reduce that? And some of these Western economies are looking at load growth. They have not seen it for decades together. And they're saying, and how do I rapidly ramp up my infrastructure? So we're saying, until you do that, until you build your heavy capex, can you bring that digital infrastructure as a way to sort of manage this growth stress momentarily and sustainably in the long term? So digital compensating for the physical infrastructure expansion seems to be something that they can relate to and coming to terms to. So it's been a roadshow of discussions, but massive learnings, and contexts are so different, very different problems. But I think common infrastructure helps you create context-specific narratives, problems that they care in their context, in their country, without impinging, especially talking about energy, without impinging on the sovereignty and autonomy, both of the country, of the utilities, of the operators. So very interesting threads. And some of these learnings we are trying to bring back to India and see how they can be put to place.
Thank you for taking the time. I had a wonderful time learning about this.
Thank you. I love the conversation. Thanks for having me.